With many recording studios closed throughout 2020 and into 2021, home recording is becoming a more viable and necessary option. With that in mind, I've put together for you 21 home recording tips for you to get better home recordings in 2021. We're talking gear, workflow, and technique. I want to help you get better quality and more professional recordings from home. They're in no particular order, they're all super helpful, so make sure you stick around for the full 21. Let's do this. Number 1, consider the space that you're recording in. The sound of the room that you're recording in can be as equally as important as the microphone you're recording with or the instrument you're recording. Any room in your home is going to have its own acoustic response. For example, if you're in a purpose-built studio room with treated walls, you're going to be getting minimal reverb, and any reverb that remains will hopefully be tonally balanced. But if you're recording in an open-plan kitchen diner, you're going to be getting a lot of nasty reverb, harsh roominess that your microphone is going to pick up during recording. If you don't have a purpose-built studio room, consider recording in the room that's going to give you the least amount of unwanted ambience. Maybe a small bedroom, and a room that has a lot of soft furnishings will help as well. So maybe you've got a bed in there, a sofa, and so on. When you're recording at home, there's not much you can do about the shape of the room. So ideally, you just want to reduce the ambience as much as possible. Investing in some acoustic treatment can really help. Even the cheap foam panels are better than nothing. And if you truly have nowhere in your home that's suitable for home recording and you don't have the budget to make somewhere, then consider how you can record to mitigate any unwanted room sound, which brings me on to tip number 2. Get the right mic for the job. You'll likely be using one of two main common types of microphones, either dynamic or condenser mics, but they both respond to sound very differently. In a nutshell, dynamic mics are built for picking up loud sound sources at a closer range. So they're not as good at picking up sound sources from a distance, but you can use that to your advantage. Whereas condenser microphones, they're generally a lot more sensitive. Their pickup pattern is normally larger, and they're great for using in an acoustically treated room. Then if your room doesn't sound perfect, consider sticking with dynamic microphones. Get to know your microphone. All microphones aren't created equally. Every microphone sounds different, and the more you use your microphone, the more you'll get to know its sound, and your recordings will improve because of it. So try different microphone placement techniques. Critically listen back to your recordings and hear the difference between different placements. Listen to how it works on different instruments and different sound sources. You might find that one mic isn't right for a certain job that another one is. Just get to know your microphones and your recordings will improve. DI is your friend. If you don't have any microphones yet, or you're recording in a space where in a noisy space at home where you really can't use microphone, DI, direct input, is a great option. You can plug your instrument directly into your audio interface, or ideally through a DI box, and you can get some perfectly usable results. I go over how to get great guitar recordings using DI in this video, which I'll link on the screen now. Test recordings. Always take a test recording first and listen back and see how it sounds. Nothing's worse than recording a full song and listening back and realizing you've got some background noise going on or the mic placement's off. So always make a test recording first. Use closed back headphones when recording with a mic. If you're recording something in a small room at home with a mic and you've got open back headphones on and you're monitoring the backing track or the rest of the instruments while you're recording, say recording your vocals, chances are there's going to be a little bit of bleed from the open back headphones. It's going to get picked up in your mic and ruin your recording. The worst thing is if you're performing to a click track and you end up with that incessant clicking just faintly in your recording, which can be really difficult to get rid of. So closed back headphones are the way to go. Use a pop filter for vocal recordings. Please don't perform vocals without a pop filter. It creates this nasty windiness, this windy sound called plosives into your microphone. They can't always be removed and they can really ruin a recording. This is especially common with podcasts where the speaker was sadly unaware that you do need a windsock or pop filter in front of your microphone when you're recording vocals. It sounds more professional and makes this so much more pleasant for the listener. You don't need to record as loudly as possible. I was once taught that you should record as loudly as possible without clipping, without hitting that 0 decibel mark. But in reality, you really don't need to record that loud. Your meters shouldn't be going anywhere near that 0 dB mark when you're recording. You get this nasty distortion, this digital clipping when you hit that mark, and it can ruin your recordings. I go into detail on exactly how loud you should record in this video, which I'll link on the screen screen now. Invest in an audio interface. If you're plugging your instruments and microphones directly into a computer with one of those little adapters, I highly recommend upgrading to a dedicated audio interface. Even something cheap like a PreSonus audio box or a Behringer Euphoria will do wonders for your recordings. It will improve the quality, the consistency, and it will give you far greater control over recording. Save after every take. Audio software has a tendency to crash when you least expect it. So get in the habit of hitting that Control S or Command S shortcut every time you just finish a recording. You don't want to lose any progress after you've just nailed a perfect take. Get in the habit of hitting Control S or Command S, whichever your save shortcut is, after every recording to make sure you don't lose any progress. Check your instruments before recording. Your recordings are only as good as what you're recording. You can have the best mics or preamps, but if your guitar's out of tune or the strings are dull, for example, you're likely going to want to re-record it after you've listened back. Check your instruments before you start recording and regularly throughout the session. Warm up your voice before a vocal performance. And similarly, if you're a vocal performer or speaker, give your voice a gentle warm up before the session. Even if you don't feel like you need it, your voice will start deteriorating throughout the session and give you a worse recording because of it. It'll help you nail those falsettos the first time round. Choose the right sample rate. Sample rate is often one of those settings that's ignored when starting a session, but it's important to pick the right sample rate so that you're getting a good quality, but also you're not overusing your CPU and disk space. I'll go over exactly which sample rate I recommend you use in this video, which I'll link on screen and in the description now. Choose the right bit depth. Bit depth is another one of those settings that's often not considered when starting a recording session. In a nutshell, the bit depth that you choose determines the number of available amplitudes that your system has to choose from when digitizing an audio sample. It's important to get this right, so again, you're getting a good quality recording, but also you're not overusing your disk space. I go over exactly how bit depth affects your audio and which one you should pick in a video I'll link on the screen and in the description. Keep the right distance between you and your mic. If you get too close to your microphone, particularly a condenser mic, your recordings will suffer from the proximity effect. This is when you get too close, your microphone tends to pick up more of the bass frequencies. Your recordings will be overly bassy, you will lose some of the natural ambience if that's what you're going for, and it will exaggerate some of those sort of lip smacks and plosives that you don't want on your recordings. On the other hand, if you're too far away from the mic, your recordings will lack clarity, warmth, and intimacy. A good rule of thumb for speaking or singing into a mic is keeping a couple of hand widths between your mouth and the front of the microphone. You will need to experiment with this though, depending on what you're recording and what mic you're using, which leads me on to the next tip. Experiment. The more mic placements and different recording techniques that you try, the easier it will be to get your head around how to use different mics and different placements in various scenarios when recording different things. There's rarely a right and wrong when it comes to audio engineering, and there are infinite different ways of recording. Try different techniques, listen back, and if something doesn't sound right, then keep experimenting. Scheduling means success. There's nothing like rushing to ruin the potential of a recording. I've ran studio sessions before where I'll have a full band who's trying to record 4 or 5 songs in about that many hours. And so they're trying to get the drums, bass, guitars, vocals done basically in an hour per song. And they're expecting it to take just as long as the song takes to play. But that's very rarely the case in a studio setting. You can expect to lose half the time simply warming up and making sure everything sounds right, getting mics set up, and then you realise you've only got half the time to actually lay down the tracks, so you're in rush mode, not performing as well, and then it ends up ruining the whole session. And if the band had just allowed for a little bit of extra time, an extra couple of hours for setup and sound check, and give them some sort of contingency and breathing room, even if it means recording less songs, it's better to get just a few songs done really well than a bunch of tracks done that you just sort of end up re-recording. Spend money on what matters. If your recordings aren't turning out how you'd like them to, then be very careful when it comes to spending money to try and resolve the problem. As long as you've got a quality mic and audio interface, 9 times out of 10, any problems you're coming up with when recording can be resolved for free. Most of the time, this will be through education. Try and put into words what problems you're having, or even export the audio, get it uploaded or describe your issues on an audio forum, or you can even reach out to me. And a lot of the time it's just something to do with the technique or maybe the room setup that you can sort out without having to spend any more money. Use an engineer or friend. If you're a solo artist, then enlisting the help of an assistant engineer can really help if they're the ones hitting the record button and you can focus 100% on your performance. It can be very hard to focus when you're having to get up and down and fiddle with your DAW between takes. Try dual miking. If you have room in your budget for a second microphone, then using dual miking techniques can make the recording process a lot more interesting. You can try getting a matched pair of pencil condensers to record your acoustic guitar for a nice stereo effect. You can try miking up an amp with 2 different microphones and blending the 2 sounds together. Or if your room is acoustically treated, you can consider setting up a condenser mic or 2 somewhere in the room to get a nice ambient recording. And if you record a podcast with 1 condenser mic between the 2 of you, try upgrading to 2 separate dynamic mics so you can both have a mic each. There's no bleed between the 2 tracks, and you'll hear a huge improvement in the audio quality. The possibilities are endless. Just keep recording. Nothing will improve your recordings though as simply recording more and more and more. You'll likely start off by making a few bad recordings, just like I did at the beginning, but that's okay because when you listen back to them, it'll be really motivating when you hear the progress that you've made. So those are the 21 recording tips. Let's use this year to improve our skills and get some awesome professional quality recordings from home. Let me know in the comments section below, what tip are you going to be putting into action first to improve your recordings? And if you want more recording and mixing tips and advice like this, then hit that subscribe button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.